At the end of the last episode we left the Zorki C, or Zorki S, more or less disassembled on the workbench. I won't go through the entire rebuild because much of it is simply a reversal of the disassembly process, but I thought it was worth looking at a few of the reasons that the camera needed to come apart. This slightly out of focus object is the shutter release shaft, and the gear down at the bottom has to rotate rapidly as the front curtain opens. If I move it close to my audio recorder, hopefully you can hear how dry and chattery it is when I spin it. Just that alone will cause the shutter to be sluggish. Then there were some pretty massive chunks of film jammed down at the bottom of the chassis. The spring drum shafts have sticky old grease that makes them feel more like a rotary friction damper than a freely moving assembly. And the second curtain drive is equally dry and sticky, so I'll go away and do some cleaning and return when there's something interesting to see. I've already removed the C-clip from the shutter release shaft and re-lubed it, and it feels lovely now. Additionally, the shaft that screws into the gear on the sprocket drum was way too tight to remove in episode 1, and there's no point risking breaking it when I can just work round it. But now, with the shutter apart, I can release the screw in the sprocket drum to separate it from the gear shaft. Again, I've already cleaned and re-lubed this, so it's now all moving smoothly. Removing the small keyway screw allows the lower drive dog and spring to come out for the cleaning. I can also remove the big screw from the base of the main housing, and the small end stop screw from the top, and remove the somewhat dirty curtain limit gear for cleaning and re-lubricating. Additionally, once I'd cleaned off the old goopy grease, there's a washer that sits above the limit gear to control its vertical movement. The next part is open to debate. Ideally, I would unstick the curtains from the spring drums, open up the drums by removing each end cap, clean the shafts and bearing surfaces, also soaking the springs in paraffin to remove the old goop, before lightly re-oiling the springs and bearings, reassembling the drums and re-sticking the curtains. You can sometimes remove the end caps without ungluing the curtains, but it does usually involve disturbing the curtains in the process. Or I could go for the easy option of cleaning the shafts as well as I can with a small amount of paraffin to dissolve the grease, before lightly re-oiling them. Whichever option I go for, they will work far better than they do at the moment, so I'll return in a minute once I've made a decision. Okay, decision made. If I was doing this off camera, I would probably just grip the end cap with a pair of pliers, but as you are all watching, I've made 2 more of my collet wrenches, or whatever you want to call them. And now I should be able to grip the end caps without damaging them, and remove the shaft and spring from within. That was actually looser than I expected this time. And out it comes. And that was definitely the right decision. Just look how dry and goopy the old grease is on that spring. So into the paraffin it goes for cleaning. Rather handily, the second one didn't put up any more of a struggle, so that was definitely the right choice. And those should be running nice and freely when the camera goes back together. Now, making sure I make a note of the orientation in relation to the main shaft. There are some marks at the top of the main shaft where the spring has been digging in over the years. I can remove the screw securing the bottom pulley. I'll re-glue the ends of the ribbons later because the old glue is pretty crumbly now. And with that out, I should be able to wriggle the gear and pulley off the shaft. Thusly, the rear curtain drum should now slide off, revealing the main shaft itself. And just look at the state of it. Right, I'll get that lot cleaned, lubricated and reassembled and return shortly. The upper pulley is also held by a single screw, so I've taken that one off at the same time. If I remember correctly, on the later cameras these screws are partially sliced down their length, with the protruding section opened out so they will never rattle loose. This makes the process of cleaning this section that bit more tricky. Okay, that lot is cleaned and reassembled. I'm going to do a dry run for the video, and then I'll take it apart again to lubricate the bearings on the ends of the spring drums and reassemble it again. That way I won't spread oil everywhere while I'm messing around trying to get a good video clip. So firstly, I'll make sure that the curtain limit gear is against the end stop when pushing it towards the back of the camera. Also making sure I fitted both ribbon guide pulleys on the front curtain spring drum, along with its spacer at the bottom. And of course the washer or washers on the bottom of the main drum. Now I want to offer it into the lower chassis, seating the bottom end of each spring drum. It's a bit fiddly, made far worse by attempting to film a video. Once those are in place, I can loosely fit the adjuster nuts at the bottom so they don't pop out again. If I now insert the main drum into its bearing hole, meshing it with the curtain limit gear while the curtains are in about the correct position at the end of the film gate, and then temporarily fit the top plate, making sure that the pin from the second curtain cam goes into the hole in the second curtain drum. As always, it's a bit fiddly. I'll want to get the tops of the curtain shafts seated as well, and then pop a couple of screws in for a moment or two. I deliberately haven't fitted the shutter release shaft at this stage because I'll be opening it up again in a second. Now I can apply a little bit of tension to both curtains and lock them off at that. And with that bit of tension applied, I can look at the rear curtain cam against the mark I made in part 1, and it's sitting out of position, probably by 1 tooth on the limit gear. So I'll open it up again and shift it by 1 tooth and then try again. And that's about right this time round. So keeping the limit gear meshed, I'll pop the top off again and insert the shutter release shaft and reassemble this section for the last time. Or at least it would be the last time if I'd already lubricated those parts, but I'll do that now and get this section back together. I'm going to preload the curtain springs to 3 turns on the front curtain and 2.5 turns on the rear curtain. This appears to have been my starting point in the past, and it's best to use as little tension as possible to achieve the correct shutter speeds. I'm sure it will need a bit of tension juggling before we're done. I've also fitted the curtain shields, which are a bit fiddly to get into the correct place because the holes are oversized to allow for some adjustment. So I'll now go away and build up the top half enough so I can test the shutter speeds. This should simply be a reversal of the disassembly process, but if there's anything worthy of note, I'll pause and film another clip. And here it is, more or less reassembled, and feeling so much better than when I first got it. Probably as good as, if not better, than any other Zorki that I've used. It's still not as silky as the Leica 3 that I was playing with a few days ago. I was very tempted by that one, but the price was way too high for a camera with a sticking shutter, a very cloudy viewfinder and rangefinder, and a lens that was so dirty it was impossible to tell if the glass was serviceable or not. I do want to get my hands on an early Leica one of these days, purely to tear it apart and see how much better it is than its Soviet counterparts. And sorry if there's some background noise, it's blowing a hoolie out there at the moment. Anyway, back to the Zorki. Similar to the Zorki 6, on this model you can change the shutter speed before or after you've advanced the film, which is nice, but possibly best to stick to only changing it after you've wound on in case you forget which camera you're using and cause yourself an inconvenience when out shooting with your Zorki 4 or whatever. You can't move between bulb and 1/500th of a second. You have to go all the way round to do that. Compared to twin roller SLRs, I always find Zorkis and Feds a bit of a pain to get even curtain travel at all speeds. The shared drum for both the front and rear curtains just feels like a bad idea to me. But anyway, after much curtain tension juggling, this one is working about as well as my other Zorkis and Feds. My biggest aim is to get an even exposure from one side of the frame to the other. The actual speeds, so long as they're there or thereabouts, will do. If you look at the design, when the front or opening curtain moves, it's dragging a chain of 3 gears with it, whereas the rear or closing curtain just has its own drum to move. If I put a little tension on the speed dial, you can see the shutter working slowly. Also, the pair of them share the same axle, so no matter how good your lubrication is, there is a tendency for the rear curtain to travel faster when it's moving at the same time as the front curtain, and slower at the speeds where the shutter is fully open before the rear curtain triggers. Probably more significant on an old camera is the condition of the curtain ribbons, which over the years have become a bit sticky and frayed, also introducing drag into the system. The curtains themselves can get stiff over the years, which also slows down progress, although the material on this camera doesn't feel too bad. Anyway, I'll pop the rest of the camera back together and then adjust the rangefinder on a known good lens rather than the somewhat challenged Industar 22 that came with this one. Okay, we're all back together, but before I check the rangefinder, it's wise to check the flange distance, which should be 28.8mm to the film. In theory, if the original paper shims were correct, and they've been installed in exactly the same way, then the distance should still be correct. The camera needs to be set to bulb, and the shutter locked open by rotating the shutter release button anti-clockwise when pressed. One day I'll get a proper depth gauge for this job, but for now I'll use my calipers. If done correctly, this can still be pretty accurate. More accurate than the slop on the mount of an Industar 26 or 61 lens anyway. Whatever the distance, it wants to be equal in all four corners. Mine measures 28.84 over on the right and 28.64 on the left, and I'd be willing to bet that it's been like that since it was made. So I'll go away and cut some more shims in a bit. Ideally they'll be cut from oiled manila, which is fairly resistant to moisture and compression. Once happy with the flange distance, you can pop a trusted lens onto the camera and point it at something that has a clear horizontal line to see if the vertical alignment of the rangefinder patch is correct. If it isn't, there's a rotating wedge at the front of the patch window that can be turned to correct the alignment. The entire housing will unscrew from the camera using the outer notches, but the inner ones just rotate the wedge itself. Sometimes these are so full of paint they won't move, but this one is nice and free. Once you're happy with that setting, the decorative cover can be replaced. Next is the horizontal alignment. I usually set the lens to infinity and go outside on a nice bright day looking at a nice contrasty object in the distance. I usually go for a white house that's about half a mile away. If the rangefinder patch doesn't line up horizontally, remove the screw to the right of the viewfinder window, and behind that is an adjuster screw to correct the alignment. It'll usually take a little bit of trial and error to dial it in perfectly. Once the vertical and horizontal alignment are correct at infinity, just the close focus needs checking. I'll usually set the camera up on a tripod with the brightly lit subject sitting 1 metre away from the film plane, and set the lens to the 1 metre mark. If the rangefinder patch doesn't line up, the error can be corrected by rotating the cam follower slightly, but I've never had to do this, which is probably a good thing because getting at the securing screw looks pretty impossible. And if you meddle with that, you'll need to go back and check the infinity focus again, and you could end up going round in circles. Other than that, the only other thing I need to do is insert a 1/4 inch adapter into the tripod socket so I can fit some sort of strap. I won't necessarily hang the thing round my neck, but I do like wrapping a camera strap round my wrist for that bit of extra security when I'm out shooting. And I think that just about wraps it up. I'll probably do a camera demo once I've run some film through this little beauty, but for now I think I'll end this video. If you've enjoyed watching, please like the video and maybe even subscribe to the channel, not forgetting to click on the bell icon so you get notifications when future videos are released. That's it for now, so thanks for watching and I'll see you in a future video.